Welcome everybody to the latest episode in the Flat Podcast. I'm your host Tony Kill, joined as always by Jordan Schultz. Obviously this is our instant reaction podcast. I am labeling this "Look Past Your Opponent" Saturday because that's what a lot of teams did this past weekend. We came into this weekend not thinking much. We're all looking forward, to next weekend and getting ready to watch all these amazing games next weekend. So we thought, oh, this is gonna be really a snooze fest this weekend. I think the teams felt the same way because they definitely came into this overlooking their opponent. And there was a lot of games that were close that should have been. There were some weird results, some upsets. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna give a recap of some of the I thought crazy results, and then we'll dive into it game by game. Obviously, in Missouri winning that crazy, 61-yard field goal to beat Kansas State. Um, I thought Penn State, Illinois was really sloppy the first half, and Illinois, if they had any type of offense, could have won that game. Florida State was winning 31-10, ended up winning 31-29 against a really bad Boston College team. Um, Notre Dame, for about a half, really just did it turn on the burners there against Central Michigan and pulled away in the second half. Then you had Alabama that looks like they have no quarterback at all, was struggling mightily. I thought they might lose this game against South Florida. I never would have thought that. Georgia was down 14-3 at the half against South Carolina. You had Ohio State 14-10 in the second quarter. You thought that was going to be a game until Ohio State really started getting things going throughout the rest of the game. Florida we thought had no chance going into Tennessee, even though it was in the swamp, and they just really dominated this game from start to finish. Michigan had a really sloppy performance with 3 interceptions by J.J. McCarthy. Texas was 10-10 in the fourth quarter till they pulled away. Then you had Colorado, a 23-point favorite, losing by 10 in the fourth quarter, able to come back and win in double overtime. So crazy games. It's like you weren't expecting these games, these results, these struggles. But that just shows you can't look past your opponent. I think a lot of these teams are resting players, trying to get as much as they can for next week. Or like in Texas, they just beat Alabama. They probably were like riding a little high, maybe trying to get some of their players rest after a tough weekend. And Wyoming almost made them pay. So let's dive into it, game by game here. We'll start with the Georgia South Carolina game, starting at the top of the poll. Georgia ended up winning this game 24-14, but like I mentioned before, they were down 14-3 at half, and you really, for me, betting $50 on South Carolina win, I was really like in my feels, but oh my god, am I going to get this money? And I did not. So thank you, world, for that. But Georgia just really clamped down on defense. I think South Carolina only had 2 possessions in the third quarter, and they got stuffed, and then they just weren't able to score any points in the second half at all. Spencer Rattler really, kind of struggled in this game. He really started off the game strong, but then struggled for a pick. I would say Carson Beck, I gave him like a C or B performance. He played okay. He didn't lose the game for him, but he didn't win the game for him either. It was just a kind of ugly, grinded out win for Georgia, and maybe that's what they needed to wake up that offense a bit for future games. But I didn't come away impressed from Georgia. What are your thoughts on this game, Jordan?
Like it's another game where it's a slow start, and I'm more worried. Not worried. If I'm a Georgia fan, I'd be worried to go into some of these games. They have a really kind of slow. Their schedule is not great, but like you're gonna go into some of these games that teams that are a little better, scrappier, can win these games that are easy. Not easy, but they win these games that are close. Like a Missouri. Like a Old Miss, Florida, even Georgia goes to the swamp this year. Those games right there, they're going to start slow. It's going to be tough. And this game, it was slow. Their offense looked just off. I think the one shining thing, and I know Tony is like the biggest thing for Georgia, is their run game is not there. That was the biggest thing that I think held them in this game and gave them the win is Edwards for going for 118 yards on 20 carries and having a touchdown. I think that really helped them, and it kind of showed that they have a run game. I'm still kind of a question mark on Carson Beck and how he just looks kind of not. I don't know. I think it's more he's not confident, and I think this offense is not making him confident enough to throw the ball and do what he wants. Like I think there's so much on him right now, especially early on, that Georgia, Carson Beck, you're the guy that needs to carry Georgia to the national championship game, and I think that he needs to get someone needs to sit him down and talk to him and be like, hey, it's okay, play your game, you got this. But right now, I think Georgia, luckily their schedule is easy, but yeah, like I said, they play in the swamp. Missouri's a scrappy team. Kentucky's a scrappy team. They play at Auburn this year. Those games, if you start slow, you're in for a rude awakening come the third or fourth quarter.
If they run into any type of offense that can, which I don't think I don't think that's on their schedule. If they run into any type of offense that could put a string of couple drives together where they score touchdowns and get up like 21-3 instead of 14-3, they may be in some trouble. And remember last year, Missouri, started getting all those points against them last year, and they had to luckily had the offense to catch up and win that game. But if that happens again, I don't know if they can do that. So yeah, I agree. They're playing with fire a bit. They've started slow in every game. I just don't know if they're motivated. They won multiple national championships. They probably coming at this trying to get there to the end, and they're probably boring opponents they have to play. They got to wake up here in the next few weeks. I think the swamp will wake them up, but but I think they'll have to do it, or they're going to get beat and ruin their season here. So something to keep an eye on. Next up, let's go to number 2, Michigan, who won 31-6. This game sounds like it was a easy game, but it wasn't. It was 14-6 at halftime. JJ McCarthy, for all the talk of Jim Harbaugh saying he's a generational quarterback that I haven't seen since Andrew Luck, and all these people have been talking about how he should be a Heisman candidate. His 8 for 13 for 143 yards and 3 interceptions and 2 touchdowns just shows me when it going gets tough this year, against those tougher opponents. This is what happened to him last year. There was a couple games he showed up. There was a couple games he didn't. I'm just thinking back to that TCU game when he threw 3 picks. He has a tendency to do this. He's a gunslinger of sorts, and he likes to try to win games where he should just really rely on it, make the right call, depend on his running backs. But at times, I feel like he just gets a little erratic. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's just I don't know if it's night game jitters. I mean, Michigan doesn't really have a lot of night games, so is it that he can't play it at night? We know? We don't. But yeah, it just looks like JJ McCarthy didn't play like honestly, we haven't really seen him play great in my eyes, but throwing 3 interceptions doesn't make you a generational quarterback. Yeah, it happens, but you're also playing Bowling Green, who is basically like your little brother. It's across the border in Ohio.
Yeah.
So you're playing Bowling Green. You should have these. You should have this game. You want that Heisman talk? Throw for 400 yards against this team for 3 or 4 touchdowns. Dominate this game. Show on a more national level, because it's a night game. There's not that many night games, so you're on TV more. Show everyone that you can compete and you're going to dominate even these teams that are lesser. But it didn't show. He had a bad game.
Yeah,
they all did. Michigan did not look like themselves. Honestly, if Bowling Green controlled the ball more, they threw 2 interceptions, they lost a fumble. If they controlled the ball more and didn't turn over the ball, I think this game would be a lot closer. And
I think it goes back to Michigan has that really good defense, and I think that won the game for him, that great defense. I do wonder, if they play a team with a pulse on offense, like a Penn State, the defense is going to have to really step up if JJ McCarthy has one of these games. And so you're asking a lot of that defense. They can't be perfect every single game, so you're going to have to really figure out what you're doing here and correct a lot of things. But this is good that it's happening now for Michigan. If they can go back, and Jim Harbaugh wasn't coaching this game. He was still doing his suspension. So maybe he comes back and works with him and show him, hey, this is what we need from you going forward. Maybe they need to make him more of a game manager until they need to have him make plays, because those interceptions can get points when you start going into conference play. So, all right. Next up, number 3, Florida State. They survived a late Boston College rally to win 31-29. They were up 31-10 here. They should have just wrapped this one up, but Boston College kept coming and almost was able to win this game. Jordan Travis, I had a quiet game. I know he got injured in the first half, but he was able to play. But really quiet, 16-24, 212 yards and 2 touchdowns against like it's a bad Boston College team. They did rest like 4 linemen, I think, in this game, Florida State. So again, you're overlooking your opponent. You're resting players because you got Clemson next week, and I think they were looking ahead to that game. So this is what happens. So, but now Clemson ended up, looking better in their game. Obviously, gets a lesser opponent. Now I'm kind of wondering that game next week. So, what do you think of Florida State? And I know you had them in the Final Four. I think I did too. Are we second guessing that with Clemson ahead next week at Clemson?
No, I don't. I'm not second guessing it. Boston College is a weird team to read. Yeah, they can be bad, but then they somehow, I don't know, beat up on a team that you would think they should lose to, and things like that. And it was also Boston College bandana game. A lot of emotions, a lot of things. And then Florida just looked, like you said, they were resting a lot of players. They just had some sloppy mistakes that costed like turnovers and touchdowns for Boston College, things like that. And their defense, I don't know if they how much they sat on defense, but their defense just looked kind of sloppy. I think, like you said, and like you call it, they weren't looking at this game like it was anything. They were looking past it, and
Yep.
this was probably one of the games that was more looked past than any other game. And but I still believe Florida State has the ability, especially to see a team be able to finish the game and compete at a high level the whole way through. Yeah, it was 31-29, but Boston College had the ball in under 3 minutes or under 4 minutes at 29 points. So their defense showing resiliency, being able to finish the game, I think that shows a lot of character on the team, and I think it's going to transition over till next week, and they're going to be fine. I think, like I said, Boston College is always a weird team to read. They always just somehow seem to put up points when they shouldn't be putting up points, and their defense plays out of their mind sometimes. So, but yeah, Florida State looked kind of off this week. Looking forward to next week. I think that's basically the biggest thing this week, but that was what Florida State was doing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree. I mentioned I think Clemson and Caden Klubnik look better, but again, it's terrible competition. I'm interested to see that game next week, Florida State Clemson. We'll talk about it in our preview podcast coming up this week. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to add to the list of games. That's going to be fun to watch next week. All right, moving on to number 4, Texas. As we mentioned earlier, they were tied 10-10 in the fourth quarter when they scored 21 points. Quentin Ewers had a really terrible game. 11 of 21 for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know this is kind of one of those come back to earth games after playing really good game against Alabama. I will say for Wyoming, maybe they should be in the Big 12 because they beat Texas Tech. They gave Texas all they can handle. I mean, it's geographically makes sense, and they're playing well. Let's go to throw them in the Big 12 too. Why not? But Texas here, I think this is just a simple like resting some players, getting really being high from that Alabama win, and then coming back down to earth a little bit against this Wyoming team. What was your thoughts?
no, yeah, I think that's what it was. I think resting players from a tough Alabama game. I mean, I wouldn't. Alabama players are twice the size of Wyoming players on defense and offense. The biggest thing I think with this this game was that Texas was a little sloppy at points, 6 penalties, and Wyoming just controlled the game offensively for a while. They had over 17 more minutes of possession. Other than that, I think Texas, like you said, it was a come down from the high of playing Alabama. They still won comfortably. I think, like you said, they were resting players, but they showed right after, like, they scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. They can do it. They can put up those numbers fast and easy. So I think I'm not worried about where Texas is going to be come, the next couple of weeks. They play Baylor, they play Kansas. I think they're only, they're looking forward to playing Oklahoma. And I think that right now is, it was a look past opponent this week, but they're look past the next two opponents until they play Oklahoma. So I think it was a come down from the high and just kind of easing back into being a normal football team, because if you beat Alabama, it kind of you're on that
I
high.
wonder now, though, does that Alabama win look a little worse this week because Alabama struggled against South Florida?
I don't think it looks worse. If it was at Texas last week and the Alabama won, or Texas won, it'd be different. It'd be because it was at
Alabama,
and they went in there and they didn't just beat Texas or Alabama. Texas dominated the game the whole way through. Even though it was a close at points, they just looked like the better team. And that's why I still think the game against, if it was, like I said, if it was at Texas, it'd be different. But going into Alabama after almost beating Alabama last year, it still counts. Still big.
Yep, I agree. All right, moving on to number 6, Ohio State. They won 63-10. As I mentioned, this one was close in the second quarter. It was 14-10, and Ohio State just, I think they're, combination of Kyle McCord really starting to play better in the offense. The defense looked a lot better, turning over Western Kentucky 4 times, really helping to get 35 points in that second quarter to really pull this one away. Overall, I think this was the most impressive showing so far this year for Ohio State. This is kind of what we expected every game this year to look like for them, and they struggled out of the gate, but now they're starting to gel and get things together. What were your thoughts here on Ohio State?
I think the biggest thing for Ohio State is actually naming a starter. 100%. Putting your faith in that one guy, I think it helps lower, the stress of being Kyle McCord's sitting there, and he's like, every pass has to be perfect. Everything I do has to be good. I have to have the best game every week so I don't get benched. But this was the first time where he's like, okay, I can do a little less and be something else. And I think that's what we saw, last year with Georgia. After Stetson Bennett had that 1 year, he came back his second year and was more comfortable. It looked like didn't care what really happened. And I think that's what we saw this week. Also, but it was against a lesser opponent in Western Kentucky where they honestly, this whole season for Western Kentucky has been kind of not like what we've seen, what they can put up in points and everything. I know, Tony, if anyone placed a bet on Western Kentucky to cover the spread, message Jess Saban on Twitter.
Right. He'll work with you on that.
Yeah.
But second quarter was looking pretty good. If you cashed out right then, you would have been looking good. So saying, but you probably didn't. So I'm sorry about that. So I think interesting, Notre Dame, Ohio State next week. We'll talk about that in the preview podcast, but that's going to be a interesting one. I think it's interesting to see Kyle McCord back on the road in a nighttime environment, how he does, how that team gels. But it should be a fun contest. All right, moving along. Number 7, Penn State won 30-13. Again, this was an ugly game. It was 16-7 at halftime for Penn State. Drew Aller had not a great performance, 16-33 for 208 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. It was just kind of there. But it was about the defense of Penn State or maybe the lack of offense on Illinois' part. Luke Altmaier, the quarterback for Illinois, threw 4 picks in this game. And then, his, backup John Paddock for a touchdown and 129 yards. But I just don't, this is an ugly game. I don't think Illinois can get anything going offensively. Their defense obviously always plays well. And so they were able to kind of help keep them in the game for the first 2 to 3 quarters, but then Penn State just kind of pulled away. Any thoughts there on Penn State?
Good defense. I think, yeah, Illinois' offense is kind of lackluster. It's not really anything to go home about, anything. So, but Penn State's defense, it really showed that they, these scrappy games. Illinois' defense is always, anytime I feel like not every team in the Big Ten, but like the, teams the Illinois teams, the Wisconsin teams, the Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, those teams right in the area right here are always tough, no matter no matter if you're 0-7 or 7-0, you go and play Illinois, Indiana, Ohio State. No, the bad teams, Illinois, Indiana. They always give you that scrappiness. Ohio State, the first week against Indiana, that was a scrappy game. That right here showed that it's just a conference game. So it makes it's a scrappy game. Always, especially in the Big Ten, they always beat up on each other, no matter who it is, unless you're Rutgers, and you just lose always. But that was what this was. Penn State's defense looked really, really good. Offense looked kind of, I don't know what they're looking to next week. Or maybe they're looking forward to Iowa next week. But right now, their defense looked really good. And that was the shining point right now of Penn State, which they need is that defense.
Yep. Agree. All right, moving on. Number 8, Washington. This is, to me, has been the most impressive team so far this year. They won this game over Michigan State 41-7. Michael Penix with another huge game, throwing for 473 yards and 4 touchdowns. They really shut down Michigan State defensively, as well as Noah Kim, their quarterback for Michigan State, only threw for 136 yards and 1 interception, no touchdowns. Really dominated this game. Michigan State got a late touchdown to get on the board. This was the complete domination by Washington. This is at Michigan State, so it wasn't like this was at Washington. This is at Michigan State, and they dominated us like this. What are your thoughts on Washington? Or do you agree with my statement? They're the most impressive team so far.
No, yeah, they're definitely the most impressive team. They just put up points. They don't. They honestly don't look like any other team that's playing right now who starts slow. Once the game starts, Michael Penix Jr. is on the gas the whole time until he's taken out. He puts up numbers. He plays like his heart desires. And honestly, I think they're right now the best team in the Big 12 or Pac-12. And they honestly look like they have the best offense behind. Honestly, it's a close USC Washington, but USC has had slow starts. Washington just looks like they want to have a lead so they can take their starters out. And this week was another example. And I also think the Penn State or Michigan State weird
situation didn't help anything.
Michigan State, but I also think Washington looks dominant. Michael Penix Jr. seems like he wants that Heisman more than anything, and he looks comfortable no matter what he's doing. And Washington's going to be a scary team to play when we get to Oregon in the next couple weeks, USC the next couple weeks. They have a tough schedule, but their offense can put up the numbers. And this was another showing that Washington probably has one of the best quarterbacks in college football, if not the best quarterback right now, in my eyes.
No, I agree. I think he's neck and neck now, Caleb Williams, as far as the Heisman. So good for him. And this is why I picked Indiana to have that good season a couple years ago, because I knew he had this potential.
But then you talked about it. You talked it to an existence, and it just kind of.
Well, hopefully I don't talk of it to this is now where he just has a terrible season.
I think Washington has a good. They built a good team around him in the last 2 years.
It's not just all him. I think Indiana was all him. So yeah. All right. Moving along, number 9, Notre Dame. I was at this game yesterday. It was an ugly game. It was 41-17, 21-point victory. This was, again, looking past your opponent. They have Ohio State next week. They rested. They have some injuries. I think they were a little over conservative with, so they rested some players on defense and offense. They rotated a lot. They pretty much play all their second, third string defensive players on the line and the corners. There was a couple of drives where they scored a touchdown. They had their backups in, so and that was earlier in the game. So I feel like Notre Dame just didn't have their foot on the gas this whole time. They just kind of looked sloppy. Offense looked good. They had a lot of big play explosions. Audric Estime had 176 yards rushing. Sam Hartman had another good game, 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, overall, it is kind of sloppy. But, again, I think they're kind of looking ahead. I will say the refs of this game, I think it was ACC refs, they just terrible calls where they just called phantom calls and calls that kept the drives alive for Central Michigan on this one. But yeah, for Notre Dame, you just get out of there with a win. Nobody got hurt. I remember got a little dinged up, but I think he's fine. So nobody got hurt. You're going ahead to Ohio State. Any thoughts here on Notre Dame?
No, like you said, this is one of the ones that the team's looking forward to the next game, kind of thing. They're resting players. They looked a little sloppy here and there, but they got it done. They still won comfortably. And it's like, I think the biggest thing with this game that is coming out of this game is, they're a dual threat team. You don't know what they're going to do, and I think that's the scariest thing. There's a lot of teams right now that only can run, only can pass, and they can do it both. And the good thing right now, I think, is that they have a competent backup also.
Yeah, Steve Jelly. Yeah,
and Jelly, he looks good. He looked good in the Tennessee State game. He looks good right now. He threw 2 passes in this game, but still, he looks good. And I think that's the biggest thing is if Sam Hartman does get hurt, knock on wood, he won't. But their backup's competent enough maybe to still win these.
As long
games.
as it's not an Ohio State game. If it's like this, like Louisville, maybe they have a chance. We're not definitely don't feel like he could beat Ohio State here or anything. But yeah, I feel like he has. He's getting some good experience this year, and we'll see what happens with him next year after Hartman leaves. So.
And the big thing with this season is they have their explosive plays. I mean, estimated with a 41-yard run, Chris Tyree with a 76-yard touchdown reception, Merriweather with a 76. You got a 39, a 42. The big plays is what you don't really see at Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's usually grind you out, score that way. But yeah, they're big play or nothing kind of thing right now, which could be scary if you're playing a really good defensive team. But also, it means eventually you're going to break a couple of those off and get back into a game as well, which they haven't been able to do in the past. So in the past, when they get behind a big team early, it's hard for them because they don't throw the ball like that. But now, I mean, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I would feel more comfortable that I'm down like 14 points. We are still in this game, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, moving along to ugly game. Alabama, number 10 Alabama beat South Florida 17-3. This game was 3-3 at halftime, Jordan. And South Florida is not a great team, so that's surprising me. If this was Central Florida, I think Central Florida would have won this game because they have offense, but South Florida does not. Tyler Buchner, me and you obviously follow Notre Dame. We've seen a lot of Tyler Buchner. We could have predicted this was going to happen, but he played much better in Notre Dame than this. I don't know what's going on here, but 5 of 14 for 34 yards and a 15 QBR.
It was raining.
I don't care if it's raining. You got to be able to get better than a 15 QBR at Alabama with their offensive line, though, I will say, it's been terrible. They have a lot of 5-star guys, but they're not ready, I don't think, yet. What are your takeaways here in this one?
This is the Alabama we have not seen in a long time.
No, you see Nick Saban walking in the tunnel. He looked like a defeated man. I actually felt sorry for him. He looked very sad. I just want to say that.
And so when an Alabama relies more on their run game than their pass game, we know something's wrong. And
the thing is, their running game is not that great. I mean, they had Rodale Williams had 129 yards, but I mean it took them a lot to get there. I mean, that was 17 carries. I just feel like, man, this team is just not right. They don't have their skill players right now. I just don't see it on the either on the running backs or the wide receivers. I don't see anybody that scares me on that team right now, and I think that's different about Alabama. They always just had as a defense. Obviously, looks good. It helped that they were playing against South Florida, but I just don't like. I don't see it with this team.
No, yeah, I definitely don't. I think that it's that quarterback question. We haven't seen an Alabama without a quarterback. Mac Jones, Bryce Young, Tua. You had these players. Jalen Hurts. You had these players, quarterback wise, that are doing things in the NFL. I don't see NFL caliber quarterback on Alabama. I don't even see not their offense does not look like Alabama's offense, and I don't know what's going on there, but something has to be done. And thank you for taking Tommy Rees from us.
We appreciate it. I did see somebody post that they're ready to return Tommy Rees and Tyler Buckner, that they had their 30-day return, but we have a no return policy here in Notre Dame. So
yeah. and it's been 30 days already.
Yeah, it's past that. We can give you some store credit. We can't take the items back though. So
we can give you half store credit. And it only goes to the Notre Dame bookstore, so I don't know what you're gonna do with that.
Yeah. Now you can send us another player. We'll take that. Down the road.
I don't know who we want on their team.
We don't want anybody offense. Maybe we'll look at the defensive side and get some players there. So, all right, moving on to number 11, Tennessee. Honestly, I didn't see this coming. I was messing with Florida fans on Twitter this week and saying, "What is Florida going to beat Tennessee at? Because it isn't football." And I was wrong. I'll leave my wrongness here on the podcast. But Florida won 29-16. Tennessee just can't win the swap. I didn't think I just thought Tennessee was going to be better, but we mentioned on there that Joe Milton, he could be inconsistent, and he has been in the past, and that's what we got here. He had 287 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns and a pick, but his QBR was low. He had to throw a lot of passes. He just wasn't, connecting throughout the game, and I was surprised Florida won. What do you have to say, Jordan?
I don't know why we didn't see it. Maybe it was just because we didn't. It was a game that we didn't care too much about. But Tennessee does not know how to win in Florida since 2003, 2002, one of those two.
Teams just can't win in Florida. Utah lost their. I mean, it's a tough place. The Swamp is not. I mean, it's not an easy place to play. The humidity and all that too. I just, it's different.
Yeah, and I just think that Tennessee's offense looked uncomfortable, didn't look explosive, and honestly, this was the win Florida needed. I think this is huge. I think this really made, it was like I said, it was a make or break game for their recruiting, and this was a make game, and I think Florida is slowly trending up in my eyes.
I'm not going that far yet. I want to see some cover.
Slowly trending up.
Yeah.
Big win. If they can repeat what they did in this game at home against Georgia, hey, I might say they're winning national championship next year. But
whoa, slow it way down, Jordan. Okay, way down.
Calling it here.
All right, well, I'll save this video and play it at the beginning of next year's preview season. Okay.
I'm kidding, but no, yeah, Florida just looked. They dominated this game all the way through, and Tennessee just looked kind of lost.
Yeah, I was kind of not buying Tennessee. That was part of. I mean, I think there were some top 10 list last couple of weeks with them on it, and I don't think we had them on there. I just feel like they're just missing something. I think it's the quarterback position. So. Maybe they'll go to the young quarterback that they're paying a lot of money for next. But I just don't think Joe Milton's going to get it there for him. No. All right. I'll just quickly touch on Utah. They played. They did what they're supposed to do. They did not look past Weber State. They won 31-7. Utah doesn't look like the team that would look past anybody anyway. They just go in there, defensively destroy you, and then move on with life. So they won 31-7. Nate Johnson had a decent game, 193 yards. They are probably desperately missing Cam Rising.
I wouldn't be surprised.
UCLA next, right?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see him next week play against UCLA, just because it's a huge game.
Yeah, I think they're kind of trying to get him ready for that one. We'll see if he is because they don't have him. They're losing that game.
They yeah, and then Oregon, they play Oregon State after that.
They need him. Yeah, I don't know how helpful. I mean, that's a quick turnaround from January torn
Hey man,
ACL.
Cam Rising is the man.
It's
All
going to
right.
rise above it. I know. Um, we'll see if he does. See if he does. All right. Let me see who else is here. So let's talk about LSU. I predicted LSU. I was talking of LSU fans as well. Maybe I'm just like jinxing teams from doing terrible and making them play well.
Yeah, you
So
need to
hey, you
stop.
can fake me. You can fake me now. However you guys want to fake me. Cash benefits would be great. Um, LSU won 41-14. They look like the best team in the SEC, which is weird because they did not look like that against Florida State. It's kind of a week to week season, I guess. But Jaden Daniels, 30 of 34 yards, 361 yards. 30 for 34, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really, really great game. He also ran for 64 yards. Logan Diggs had 41 yards as the top rusher. They look good. I will say the Mississippi State offense did not. I thought Will Rogers was going to play better. I wonder with Mike Leach no longer being there, rest in peace. I wonder if that hurts him at all because he was 11 of 28 for 103 yards. That just doesn't seem like his type of performance. I also maybe it's the LSU defense, but I really felt like the corners were a weakness. It's based on what we saw in a Florida State game. But again, that's where you develop from week 1 to week 2 and 3. So maybe that's what it is. What do you think?
No, I think I kept hearing things about their offense was switching around because, Mike Leach's offense was more, pass heavy. And I just don't think Will Rogers is comfortable right now in this offense. Honestly, like, so I think that was the biggest thing for this game. And LSU has more star power, has more speed, has a lot more things than Mississippi State. And I think that's what carried them in this game. And I think it didn't help that Jaden Daniels probably had his best game of the season, throwing for 30 for 34, 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I don't think that helped at all. So there's not a lot to say on this game. I think LSU knew that a lot of people were talking about the game, and I think they handled their business in this one.
Yep. I'll just quickly touch on Oregon, Hawaii. Oregon won 55-10. So it's about what you expect with a 1-3 Hawaii team. They played well the first couple games against okay opponents, but obviously they're just outmatched talent wise here at Oregon. Bo Nix had a decent game, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he didn't have to do a lot. I think Ty Thompson came in for a little bit and ran the offense. So, Oregon continues to truck along to some of the tougher matchups. I think they play Colorado next week. So we'll see how that looks like when they play that team. All right, Kansas State. They lost 30-27 on a 61-yard field goal. Missouri's that scrappy team, and we never what they did against Georgia last year. But Brady Cook, I like Brady Cook. Any quarterback that has Brady in the name, I mean, they're guaranteed to have a pretty good career, pretty good stats. But he was 356 yards and 2 touchdowns. Played well. Will Howard struggled a little bit in this game. They asked him to throw a lot. He threw 39 times. And he completed 25 of them. He had 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. They couldn't get the. I mean, they're definitely missing the what's his name running back on Dallas Cowboys now. Help me.
I don't know.
From last year, you guys know what I'm talking about. They're missing him for sure. I mean, they had a lot of. They had 35 carries for 138 yards, so only 3.9 yards a carry. They're really needing that ground game to get going. It was not getting going. With Missouri had a pretty decent defensive plan.
Deuce Vaughn,
yes. They need a Deuce Vaughn to have a game breaker, and they don't have that. So they struggled a bit here, but Missouri got another good win. So what were you? I know you were watching this one, George. What'd you think of this one?
Oh, this honestly, I watched it close to the end because I saw that it was going to be an upset. I called it. Just
you did call it. Call it on the podcast.
But I thought it was going to be going to overtime because at the end they had the last play and it was a delay of game. Because they spiked the ball, thought it was they all were huddled talking, and then the clock ran down, the play clock. So they lost 5 yards. They threw a pass that got deflected. They were like, okay. No one thought they were going to go for a 61-yard field goal. And they did, and the guy made it. It's the longest in SEC history. And the game, honestly, both teams offensively didn't look great. I don't know. They just looked, it was like a scrappy game where like one team would hit you and then the other team would hit you. And it would just, that's why the game, I just think Kansas State didn't look that great at all. I think it didn't help that it was in Missouri. Missouri at halftime was up 17-14. Kansas State scored 10 in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, they scored 3, and then Missouri scored 13. So I just think they just didn't look great. Like you said, they don't have that star to put up the numbers that would break away and have a big game or a big run. And Missouri did this game, and they had Luther Borden had 114 yards receiving. So I think Missouri is just a scrappy team, and they finished the game like they should. And I honestly would be afraid to play them just because they look like they can hit you in the mouth if they need to.
Yeah, they just pull these kind of performances, out of nowhere sometimes. Sometimes they look terrible. Some weeks they just pull out these type of performances.
And they only won by 4 last week to Middle Tennessee State. So
yeah, they're kind of like, Jekyll and Hyde there. I just don't, Jekyll and Hyde. I don't think you don't know what you're going to get to. It comes out. All right. Quickly go for some of these other ones. Oregon State 26-9 over San Diego. This was a terrible looking game. DJU looked like his Clemson self with 14 of 30, 284, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. They got to clean that up. They got to hope this is kind of a one-off game here as they look ahead to better matchups. But was not impressed with Oregon State in this one. But they just got to keep cleaning him up and getting him some development there. Ole Miss beat up on Georgia Tech 48-23. Jackson Dart, I am getting more and more confident in his abilities each and every week. Last year he struggled, but this week I really liked what he did. He didn't have to do a lot. 10 of 18 for 251 yards and a touch. They have a pretty decent stable of running backs. He also, I didn't think this Jackson Dart had his in him, but he ran for 136 yards in this game as well. So great performance there by Jackson Dart overall. I think Ole Miss, they're playing Alabama next week. Am I right on that, Jordan?
Yes, I think you're correct on that. Yes,
I'm going to predict it now. I think Ole Miss is winning that game.
They play Alabama at Alabama.
Oh, okay. I don't know what. Maybe I'll hold that pick for I know where the quarterback is in Alabama first. But I think they might win that game. So we'll talk that in the review podcast next week. I think the most impressive team right now in the Big 12 might be Oklahoma. They won another game, 66-17 over Tulsa. Now, again, this is some terrible competition, but I think Dylan Gabriel looked good, 28-31, 421 yards, 5 touchdowns, only 1 pick. I really like what Oklahoma is doing. They really these type of games last year they would have lost or made it really close. So I like that they're playing well, getting into conference play. I'm interested to see what some of these games look like. I think they play Cincinnati.
They play Cincinnati next week.
I think Cincinnati looks terrible, so they're probably going to destroy Cincinnati next week. Then I'm interested to see this Oklahoma-Texas game. That's going to be a really good game this year, I think. So we'll see. Moving ahead, obviously this was kind of the game of the weekend for some. Colorado State. Double overtime. Colorado won 43-35. Colorado State had a 10-point lead there in the fourth quarter, but Colorado State was able to come back and win. 11-point lead. Let me make that correction. And Shedeur Sanders had a decent game of 348 yards, 4 touchdowns and a pick. But Travis Hunter did get hurt in this game. I think I just read on Twitter he's going to be out a few games. Which is going to hurt them against some of the more talented, like Oregons and USCs of the world, because they need all the talent they can get when they're overturning this roster. So, any thoughts on Colorado?
Honestly, if Colorado State had a better quarterback, just a little better, then
I mean, he threw pretty good. He did good. He just threw too many picks and too many bad
if they
decisions.
didn't turn over the ball so much, I think Colorado State would have won this game. And I feel like I don't like the hype train for Colorado is slowly coming to a halt because they, I get it. It's a rival game, but when you're at home and it's a 23 point, you're a 23 point favorite, you would think that you would win this game. And I feel I'm happy for anyone that bet the over on this game because they won. Good job, everybody. but no, I think they're slowing down. I think it doesn't really help again that they can't run the ball.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing still for me is Colorado looks good offensively, but their run game is not. It's not a thing.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna do some quick hitters here to wrap us up. Duke won 38-14. They're looking impressive. I think they're going to keep winning their games, and then they have Notre Dame here in a couple weeks. That's going to be an interesting game. I think Riley Leonard, great game, 219 yards passing, 97 yards rushing. It continues to look good there. Northwestern continues to look terrible. Nothing much I'll say about that one. But North Carolina beat Minnesota 31-13. Their defense is looking much better this year. Again, last week I think it was a little bit of aberration against App State, but they look good. Drake May kind of rebounded a performance of 414 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Did have 2 picks, but overall had a pretty decent game. Miami on Thursday beat Bethune-Cookman 48-17. Cookman, sorry. And I mean, I think Tyler Van Dyke looked good. 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. The offense is clicking. Defense is playing well. So that's good for Miami to continue to go in that route. Washington State won 64-21 over Northern Colorado. Didn't know that was a team, but it is. And again, that was pretty much over from the first quarter. Cam Ward, I really like him as quarterback. I called it last year that Washington State could be a potential dark horse team. That's now carried over to this year, and I continue to say they're going to do some things.
The thing is, this is why the Pac-12 is the best conference right now in all of college football. When you have Washington State score 43 points in the first half, yeah, it's a nobody team. But then you have UCLA score 45 points in the first half against a nobody team. Their offense in Pac-12 country are crazy.
Yep. Speaking of UCLA, I mentioned they won 59-7 over North Carolina Central. Their running backs, so Anthony Atkins, 10 carries, 96 yards, a touchdown. Carson Steele, 5 carries, 83 yards, touchdown. T.J. Harden, 5 carries, 66 yards, touchdown. Colson Yankoff, 6 carries, 61 yards, touchdown. Colin Shee, 3 carries, 60 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, they're running all over his team.
404 rushing yards
and 6 touchdowns. That's crazy. Good job for them. So that's that. Utah UCLA game is gonna be interesting in a couple weeks or next week, I guess, right? Unless they're on a bye. All right, and then you had Iowa. Hey, they're on their march for 25 points a game to save Brian Prince's job there, offensive coordinator. But 41-10 over Western Michigan. The offense still looked terrible though. Cade McNamara 9-19 for 103 yards. I don't want to see how he had a pretty decent stats at Michigan, and he's perfect now. We're in the Iowa offense where he throws barely any yards and multiple picks and multiple touchdowns. I don't know. That's just terrible Iowa, but they won. So there you go. And then upset BYU. I guess upset. I don't know if I would call it upset, but BYU beat Arkansas 38-31. Keaton Slovis been pretty good in this BYU offense. He had 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. KJ Jefferson, a lot of people hyped him up in the offseason. He's just too inconsistent here. He had a pick, 37 QBR, not great. So, any closing thoughts on from you, Jordan, on week 3?
Just want to say I don't think Wisconsin's back. They were up.
Wisconsin. I did not pay attention to Wisconsin.
They won 35-14 against Georgia Southern. They were tied at 7 at halftime.
Oh man.
They did score 21 in the third quarter, but they still kind of don't look like they're back. But year 1 with new head coach, things happen.
I think Vanderbilt lost, didn't they? to UNLV.
Sure.
So
Oh,
yeah,
we just gotta put this out for Jess. App State beat ECU 43-28.
hey, well at least they had more than 3 points. I mean,
And then also Rutgers won they're 3-0, 35-16 against Virginia Tech.
how bad is Virginia Tech and Virginia?
They're bad.
The Virginia teams, man, I feel for you, Virginia fans. You don't have a pro team, and now you have terrible college team. I feel bad for you.
Oh, and then the last one is Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama 30.
We'll end on this. We'll wrap up on this.
33-7.
Oh God, Oklahoma State. What's going on there?
Oklahoma State had 114 passing yards and 94 rushing yards.
Well, when you bring in those Southern Alabamas of the world, you can't play around with them. You gotta take them serious. So, Oklahoma State, they had a lot of transfers. I would say half the team transferred, and that wasn't because they got pushed out. They decided to leave. So there's a culture thing going on there, and they definitely have to look into that and fix it or fire the coach.
And especially when you had one of the better defenses in college football 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now you let up 243 rushing yards.
Meanwhile, Spencer Sanders threw no passes for Ole Miss and had one rush for 14 yards. He left Oklahoma State. If he was at Oklahoma State, maybe they'd be better because he can actually give that pulse. I don't know what happened between those two, but I don't think Spencer Sanders should have left. They didn't need him to leave. He did. I mean, they're not either one of them are benefited. I bet if they could take that back, maybe he would go back and be quarterback there. But he can't do that. So, it was an interesting weekend. I'm really looking forward to next week. There's some really good games. Like I said, we'll preview it on the podcast in the middle of the week. As always, though, if you have any mailbag questions, anything you want us to answer about this weekend or weekend ahead, feel free to write us on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, on In the Flat Pod or via our website, intheflatpodcast.com. And make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or all the other podcast areas if you want to continue to listen and hear this as soon as it's published. All right, guys, we'll talk to you next week. Bye.